So I'll take a moment to announce our next panel, which is actually quite exciting for me especially, because I believe that every medium, every artistic medium has that innate ability to create an impact, right? Through our screens, through stage. But the live impact of a festival is underrated, I feel. A festival has the ability to create that communal feel, which is so live and so interactive and so alive, that it gives a kind of a vision of what a neighborhood, a community, a city, a country, a nation could look like. So here we are today, seeing a glimpse of the possibility of having artistic communities like this. And it helps to manifest that vision. So we're very lucky right now to have certain change makers and forces who are women, who are heading a lot of the festivals that we have recently come across in Pakistan. So the title of this next session is Festivals as Spaces of Change, because they most definitely are. Festivals are spaces to imagine a different world. Most spaces in Pakistan are very male-dominated. And in conducting festivals, we can create a vision of a society that we actually want to create. So I'd like to introduce a few powerhouses here. The founder of WOW, Women of World, Jude Kelly. Saima Aslam, founder and CEO of the Bradford Literature Festival. Qudsiya Rahim, founder of the Lahore Biennale Foundation. Amina Sayed, founder of the Adab Festival. Muniza Hashmi, founder of the Fez Festival. And this panel will be moderated by Zara Khan, founder of Art Devi. Please take it away, women.
Hello, thank you so much for being here this afternoon. I am delighted and grateful to be speaking on WOW Festival's wonderful stage and to be joined by these powerhouses of strong women who have brought so much change through the work that they do. So the title of this panel discussion is very, very apt because these women, through the festivals that they run, have already and organically created very strong mediums of change, and I'm looking forward to hearing from them about how the work that they do, how the work that they want to do has been focused around this. Jude, I thought we could start with you. We are here at WOW Festival in Lahore. This was started by you 14 years ago, you said earlier when you were chatting. I wanted to ask you what led you to create WOW Festival, a place for women, a place for change, for dialogues, discussions, culture. Would you like to indulge me?
Well, first of all, thank you for welcoming me to Lahore. It's the second time I've been here. I've been to the WOWs in Karachi, and also it's always amazing for me to come and see the incredible work that the Pakistani curatorial team do. It's just a beautiful festival. And there are festivals, so it's their contribution I want to give. And as we speak and sit here, there's a festival, a WOW festival happening in Istanbul. And I've just come back from the festival in Rio. Next month's festival in Athens. There are festivals in Australia. There are festivals all over the world. But when I started the WOW Festival 14 years ago, I had no idea that it was going to grow across the world like this. And I'm still a bit amazed. I mean, just to say something about me, I am a theatre maker. I started making drama, theatre when I was very young. I started my first company when I was 22. And I've always been interested in how audiences use the arts and conversation and culture to make the societies more cohesive, more progressive, more inclusive. That is the thing I care about the most, that you broaden out and you widen the tent so that everybody's included. And I was running a very large cultural institution in Britain called the South Bank Centre. And it was the 100th anniversary of International Women's Day in the UK, which was when most, but not all women got the vote. 100th anniversary, 14 years ago. And I realized that even though as a woman I had a very senior role in the arts, largely the stories that were being told in drama and in music and in film and in books, largely the history of all of that had been the history of what men had done and what men had achieved and the sorrows and sadnesses of men. Now, I love men, and I've got one of my own, and I've also got a son and a grandson, and I loved my dad. But I feel very strongly that unless women's stories are given equal status on the narrative stages, then women won't have equal rights. There's a direct relationship to the importance of story and the equivalent in terms of the rights of a human. And I knew that even though women had been told that they couldn't do things, shouldn't do things, oughtn't to do things, it wasn't appropriate for them to do things, they did them anyway, if they could. And the result was that the world was infinitely richer because women had pushed to be doctors, they'd pushed to be lawyers, they'd pushed to be frontline workers, they'd pushed to write novels, and as a result, everybody's very pleased. With very few exceptions. Men are glad that women have made the progress they've made, even if they're not keen to make more progress. So I decided that I wanted to celebrate everything that girls and women had done in history, everything that girls and women were doing now, across all things, not just arts, but in every walk of life. And that by celebrating what we had achieved, we would be able to have the optimism to own up to what still had to be done. Because, it's slightly humiliating to endlessly be in a situation of saying, well, we're standing behind, but we're coming. It's kind of baffling that you should have to, and it's slightly humiliating to endlessly be doing it. But I felt that if we could be excited and thrilled indeed by what we had done amongst all of us, then we would have the courage and the stamina and the optimism to keep going forward. Now, a festival is really the only place that you can put together a mosaic of many, many stories told by women who own those stories and say all of these stories are equally interesting, equally important. Some are told by famous people, some are told by people who you've never heard of, but all of these stories matter. And there's something about a festival, well, innately celebratory. Nobody's frightened of the word festival. Everybody knows in a festival it will be a place where you can eat and drink and bump into strangers and be with your friends and have new conversations. And that's a freedom which women are not often offered. And so I also think that festivals suggest to women that they are safe spaces for difficult conversations. So that's why I started WOW. I believe in festivals as a force for good, artistically and culturally, and I think that we need difficult conversations, but we need to have joy in order to have difficult conversations well and emerge with a kind of new vigor.
Absolutely. And I love what you said about festivals being places of celebration. And I think women should be celebrated and should celebrate themselves every day. I remember listening to something Reese Witherspoon said, the Hollywood actress. She said that she was looking at scripts and there was always this one line that would come up. A woman would turn to the man and say, "Oh no, what should we do?" And she said, no, women never ever ask that question. It's always the woman who knows what to do and she does it. And I believe that's true of all of you. And speaking of which, Amina, I wanted to ask you. You started the Karachi Literature Festival in Karachi, the first literature festival in Pakistan. Congratulations. And look at the impact it's already had. But I wanted to ask you, over the years of building up the Karachi Literature Festival, what was the impact like for women in terms of, did you see more authors who were female authors publishing books? Did more women start attending the festival? Were you able to gauge the very real impact that it was having in Karachi and perhaps in Pakistan as a whole?
Thank you, Zara. Assalamu alaikum. Can I just start by saying that I was always very conscious of the fact that our writers, particularly our women writers, who I felt were world class and not less than any writers globally, and I was very sad that they didn't get the recognition that they deserved. Their books wouldn't sell, they wouldn't get awards. A couple of awards that were given out in Pakistan were not credible. And all this deeply saddened me. And when I saw authors in other countries, how they were regaled and how they were honored and celebrated, I just felt that this must be done for our authors. And particularly our women authors, because I felt that they were even actually in a worse position than our men writers and poets and creative artists. So that was really the main reason that I started the Literature Festival. The first one that was, I think, held such that kind in 2010 in Karachi, the Karachi Literature Festival. And what I had in mind was this should become a movement. And at every festival, I would say that this is open source. Please take any idea you want, whatever you want from the festival, replicate it, just run away with it, do it in any way you want. And I am really delighted that it has, in fact, become a movement in Pakistan, and you see festivals happening all over the place. Now, about women writers, I think that really, our festival has, I think the force behind it has been our women writers, authors, poets, actors, singers, dancers. They have taken part, and they have been extremely popular. And I find that this was an experience I was relating to somebody, that we got a very famous Indian woman writer to the Karachi Literature Festival, and I was delighted. I thought that, she's going to be a big hit. At the same festival, we invited Bushra Ansari. And, I was surprised to see that wherever Bushra went, there was a huge following behind her. She had a big fan club. And when she got into the author's lounge, they would be clamoring and banging the door to come in just to meet Bushra Ansari. And the Indian author, who actually, in a way, was a bigger writer and better known in India, was, almost ignored. And that's what made me realize that, again, our own artists and authors, they're the ones who can become celebrities. And which is, again, as I said, the reason for holding the festival. And I find that they are what made our festival. And many young writers, upcoming, emerging women writers, would flock to the festival. They would attend sessions. And I always, at every festival, I made it a point to include them and to give them a platform. And, I really feel that in some way, it has encouraged more women to write. And it has given them more confidence. Because, this kind of it was, at the festival, we were appealing to the community. It was free. People could come from anywhere, from all walks of life. So the actual public would be there. And I remember one of our women authors who was challenged by people from the audience with some really difficult questions. And she told me, she said, I'm so glad that I've got this feedback from my readers. I didn't know that they had, this is what they thought about my novel. So I felt that, a new narrative was created, a very positive narrative about women, and it actually acted as a catalyst to encourage other women to take part in these arts. It gave them confidence. It gave them a sense of connectivity with other women when they shared their experiences the difficulties that they face, their challenges. We would invite women, and these women were role models, and they would be on the stage, and a lot of young women would be watching them and actually learning from them and gaining confidence and feeling that we can do this also. Thank you.
Thank you, Amina. You summed up the importance of festivals so well, because you're right. It's an opportunity for people to engage with authors, writers, cultural change makers from their own country who they may not have known before. And also, both the Karachi Literature Festival, the Lahore Literature Festival, draw in such engaging voices from around the world. Qudsiya Rahim, you started the Lahore Biennale and the Lahore Biennale Foundation, this wonderful public arts festival that takes over Lahore once every 2 years for a period of several weeks, often months. And I think that is such a beautiful celebration of the architecture and the arts in a city like Lahore. And it's public facing. Can you tell me a little bit about the public who you wanted to engage with and what you hope that men and women and children would perhaps take home after engaging with the arts, after having access to public spaces in hopefully a safe environment?
Safe environment. Thank you so much. I'm very honored to be with all these young women who have far more experience than I do in the field of public engagement and creating festivals. And thank you for British Council and all our hosts and Olomopolo and everybody who's engaged in bringing about this festival, and especially Judy. What a wonderful idea, women of the world. It's a good way to celebrate and recognize each other. And I believe you've founded several other initiatives which are quite notable. For us, the engagement or our mandate was very simple: bring art in public spaces, create a dialogue through arts to see, bring people together to see how we can collectively look at our collective heritage, look at art and culture. Lahore is one of the culture capitals of Lahore, Pakistan, and was also known as the culture capital of undivided India at some point, right? So we have a lot of embedded knowledge, embedded history, and last few years, like around when we moved from, my family, when we moved from New York, came back to Lahore, we realized that, right after Benazir's assassination, we saw a lot of stress. The city went through a lot of stress, and we saw these walls, building right in front of our eyes. It was a different city from what we had grown up in. It was a different city, and the response to the city for safety and other realities that were then existing, it was literally closing the doors to its own citizens. It just felt like very, very alien to us, people who are living in Lahore, because Lahore hai, right? And jisne Lahore nahi dekha usne, so all these relationships, our relationship to the city was going through with a lot of stress. And I think Lahore Biennale was a response to the citizens' response to take charge of our own narrative, to take ownership of our own arts and culture and heritage. And I think it is a collective group that came together to ask these very important questions, and see how the larger city would respond to it. And as you see that we, over the years, we have built these beautiful relationships locally, internationally. We are able to actually engage through arts in ways that and create new dialogues amongst us, which we very, over time we have developed. Public spaces are a very, so some of the learnings that we had in public spaces and working public spaces, I was never looking at creating a space specially for someone. So it was not ever about the space has to have more women in it, the space has to have more minorities in it. The idea was to create a space where everybody felt safe, where everybody felt valued, included, and the programmings are made such that it naturally kind of embeds itself in the city, and the city responds to those conditions. And one of the ways that we decided to do that was go and study the various patterns where people were naturally visiting, for example, the parks or the heritage places, or other kind of public spaces where some kind of cultural or artistic engagement was happening, and then through those places re-engage with people. So our relationship was very simple. And I mean, that's why it kind of, has a way in which it keeps moving on, and is because we're not necessarily going to make big claims, but just exist and then create a nucleus around it, a network around it.
You're right, Kutsia. The Lahore Biennale has expanded so organically, and organically over the years, because of this focus on art and culture and freedom to see these different sites and spaces, and especially some of Lahore's heritage buildings, this public space has developed on its own. And that's what's so beautiful and natural about it. And I think that's exactly what festivals can do. And of course, every festival, as we're slowly discovering, has its own theme, its own set of values, and also its own focus. I mean, coming to that, Saima, I wanted to ask you about the Bradford Festival that you started 10 years ago now in Bradford. Can you tell me a little bit about whose stories you wanted to tell, who you wanted to come to your festival, and kind of how you got going? Do you think you've accomplished all that you set out to do as the 10th anniversary comes by?
Thank you. Well, firstly, again, like everybody has said, it's such a pleasure to be here. It's always a pleasure to be in Lahore, but to be here with all these amazing women, it's such a pleasure. Thank you for having me. If I'm going to talk about the stories I wanted to tell, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Bradford and its place in the UK. So Bradford is it's one of the largest cities in the UK. It is the second largest Muslim population in the UK, mainly South Asian, mainly Pakistani. And it has a very particular place in the national imagination. So Bradford is also known as Bradistan. It has been the place where the UK press tend to come to take the pulse of the Muslim community. It has had its moments in the past. It was a city that burnt the satanic verses. It had 2 race riots. But if I take you a little bit further back, it's actually a city of migrants. And that was what the wealth of the city was built on. So it had, about 300 years ago, it had a big wave of Irish migration. In the 1800s, Jewish German merchants. And they were the ones who built the wealth of the city, because actually it's inherently a manufacturing and textile city. So those intrinsic links to empire. And then it had a wave of Eastern European migration. So we are the second largest Ukrainian population in the UK, the largest one outside London. And then the South Asian migration. And it is a city of sanctuary. So it has historically welcomed people from around the world. When the war first started in Syria, we took 50% of the refugees that came to the UK. So it's a city, thank you. So it's a city that has over 180 languages spoken. And it is political in a way that many other cities aren't. So the festival came from a number of different reasons and desires, if you like. One was to actually, when I went to festivals, when I went to literature festivals, or when I go to many cultural spaces, it is a very particular audience. And what we tend to find is wherever you are, the people who have money, they can engage with culture. It's normally the people who don't have money who can't engage with culture. And they tend to be the people who need to engage the most. So, when I go to literature festivals, I see children there. Now, they're the children who already have books. The ones who don't have books, their parents haven't brought them there because that's not natural for them necessarily. Or a lot of times you just can't afford it if you haven't got that money. So when the festival was being set up, one of the things was to actually take charge of, and I'm of Pakistani heritage, so I'm British and of Pakistani heritage. So I wanted to be able to take charge of the stories that were being told about the city, particularly about the Muslim community. I felt it was really important that it was the Muslim community telling the stories and having charge of the discourse rather than those stories being angled at that community. But I wanted it to be a festival that actually talked to everybody in the city because my reasoning was that actually if you talk to everybody in Bradford, you are automatically relevant for the rest of the UK. And you are internationally relevant. We have a very particular narrative at the moment around migrants and refugees. And the image is always one of people who are, wanting and needing, and they are, but we are having to welcome them in. I think when you have these stories, so one of the things that when we talk about the festival, we talk about international communities from around the world, and that's something that people forget when they think about refugees or migrants or economic migrants. So basically, that's where the festival came from. I would describe the program as eclectic. We literally talk about anything and everything. It's a literature festival, and I always say if there's a book about it, we can talk about it, and there is nothing that there isn't a book about. We're about the written and spoken word in all its formats. So it's literature delivered through cross art. So we have film, we have theatre, we have music. Last year we had a DJ set by Irvin Welsh of Trainspotting fame, but we also, we have Sufyan Aklam every year. And I think I programmed a festival that I thought would be good for me to attend. Just working on the basis that if I wanted to go to it, everybody else would as well. So like I said, it's very eclectic. I think for me, I'm just at home with Iqbal as I am with Byron, and bringing those things together felt very, very natural. And it is, it's a mainstream festival, so it's for all communities, but it is now also, in a mainstream space, the largest South Asian platform and also the largest Muslim cultural platform in the UK. And that's been a really, really interesting experience. So those were the stories that I wanted to tell. Those were the people that I wanted to bring together. We are the most eclectic and diverse festival in Europe. We are, over the last 10 years, we've had over 550,000 people attend from over 30 countries. We've got artists with roots in more than 72 countries. So it's been a pleasure and a privilege to actually be able to do that and to create that kind of space.
Saima, thank you for sharing. It sounds incredible. I really need to come as well because I know that everybody I speak to who has been to the Bradford Literature Festival talks about how amazing it is and how important it is to attend it. And also what a wonderful way of turning a dream and a desire into a reality, of deciding to make change. And actually each of you in your various conversations has spoken about that dream that you turned into something real and tangible. Maniz, I wanted to ask you something, in a way, about dreaming as well. You've held several directorships, and you've been at the helm of the Fairs Festival. Can you tell me a little bit about how, in your experience, having women in leadership positions, women who have strong foresight and strong dreams and personalities and a kind of a go-getter attitude, how does that then change and perhaps lay the groundwork for other women to get involved, or even for future generations?
Thank you, and thank you, Wow, for inviting me. and I hope you can all hear me. The Fairs Festival started, I just give you just a 3 or 4 sentences. He died in 1984, and so we started with having a festival, but we called it Fairs Aman Mela, which means Fairs Festival of Peace. The years, if you see them, were 1984, so we were under martial law. And it was very difficult to get even 7 or 10 people together. And so the Fairs Foundation was formed, and then they started this festival in the open air theatre, in which thousands of people came to protest against what was the political situation at the time. Slowly, after 1988-89, when democracy returned to Pakistan, then we sort of kind of went into the background, and then the Fairs Festival, as we call it, began in this very place in 2011, which was really to commemorate his centennial. Now, how did it begin? It really began, as I say, with the fact that we wanted to remember him and remember his message and messages of peace. But now we've just completed our 8th festival, and this was earlier on in February. And the idea is now to expand it and to go beyond fairs, but what fairs stood for, which was peace, which was tolerance, which was human rights, which was journalistic independence and expression of freedom of expression, and so on and so forth. So talking about women being leaders and being I don't like to say that, because I'm sure the Fairs Foundation board is going to get angry, but I do happen to be the one who runs it, or is the chief organizer, and I like to call myself the bully, because I am the bully behind the scenes. And so, but of course it's not just me, it's a whole big advisory board, and we sit together and we discuss it, and so on and so forth and so on. But of course, there has to be a leadership person, if you want to call it, or a leadership kind of a situation in which it happens. Because of my experience in Pakistan television, where I worked for 40 years, and then of course I did become the management position, I think that is what made it easier, if you want to call it, for me to run this huge festival, which is really very, very big. But I think women in leadership roles is definitely, and I heard this being discussed in a previous session as well, it's extremely important to now step into policy-making positions and being leaders, because that makes you somehow take a completely different look, or a different attitude, or a different, shall we say, mindset of what you're trying to say. And as Amina just said, bringing women authors in, or something, so there is definitely an element in the Fairs Festival, very clear element of doing 2 or 3 sessions on gender, which could be women authors, which could be women in cinema, which could be women in theatre, and there are some sitting right here who were in the festival themselves. So, and I think possibly, I don't like to say this very obviously, but I'm hoping that perhaps by seeing women in the leadership positions, as you see 3 of them here, there is definitely a trickle-down effect, and definitely people who are watching or participating or just being present feel that if they can do it, so can I. And of course, we are there always to guide and advise, and I don't like to use the word role models, but we certainly are there at the back to support. So yes, I think having a woman somewhere in the obvious position where she can be seen, she can be heard, and she can also be reckoned with in a manner of speaking. And there are times, let me tell you, Zara, that they have, I don't know about Amina, but I think I know about Qudsiya, because we do things more in public spaces. So there have been times when we have faced the local management, and they've been, I would say to me, they've been relatively gentler because we were women. I, of course, am, unfortunately, people who know me here know that I'm pretty ferocious, but I not say the same for Qudsiya. But they kind of take a back seat. Madam, madam. So then madam has to make her impression. So I think it certainly requires a certain amount of, how should I say, commitment, focus, objective focus, knowing that you have to get this done, and knowing that you know how to do it. The person in front of you is actually just using the excuse of bureaucracy or of rules or of, but madam, so then madam has to come up with certain elements in this. And that helps. Ji madam, ji madam. That's the way I operate.
And now for all of you, and whoever wants to take this question on can do so. I think, you've been so honest with your stories, with your experiences, with the challenges you faced, with why you decided to take on these very large, long-term projects and goals. There's still a lot to be done, obviously, in this arena, and I was wondering if you could chat to the audience, as well as all of us, about what each of us can do in our own communities for ourselves to make sure that lasting change comes about for women in all spaces, not just festivals, not just public spaces, but everywhere. Whether there's some learning that you have learned over your careers, over your journeys, and perhaps even from the festivals that you have put together, whether there's any book that you read, or a talk that you heard, or a film that you saw that has guided your journey in some way. Who'd like to go first?
I think for us, again, our ambition is very simple. We want the Lahore Biennale to be one of 10 million things that are happening in the city. And plurality is very important. We think inclusion, we think, community, those kind of things are very important. We would like to see more of that. And if by working in the public space, we're able to engage and other people are able to engage and create that plural space, I think that's where the success lies.
I think the thing that I always go back to, both from personal experience and from what I've seen with the festival, is reading and literacy. I think actually in terms of creating long-term change, whether it's within our local communities or actually the world over, the key thing is education. And, the reason why I set up the festival is that I work on the basis that literacy is the absolute foundation stone of any part of education. I know that as we have this in the UK, this big focus on science, and as Asians, we always have a big focus on maths and science, but actually without literacy, every part of the curriculum is closed to you, and you cannot get any further. So for me, that is the big thing that we can actually do to create change.
I think we say that festivals stimulate curiosity and make you want to understand something you didn't know before. So I think one of the things we can all do all the time is check our own biases and prejudices and remain very curious. And that also stops you getting old. And I don't just mean old in terms of your age, but people become a barrier to progress just because they stop learning and they stop being curious. So I think that's very, very important. And obviously, although WOW is called Women of the World, its byline is if you're a woman or you know a woman, it's for you. Now that obviously means everybody. But I feel very strongly that the men who are in the audience, and thank you, you need to be the ones who go and speak about why gender equity would mean so much for your life, what it means for you personally, because the conversations around equality, and in this festival it happens to be about women, but it could be about race, it could be about class, it could be about disability, it could be LGBT+, it could be lots of things. And the world that we live in is made by all of us. So in a way, a festival brings us together to celebrate and inquire. It's really important that the legacy of the festival is that you go away with more courage and apply it in your domestic and social contexts. That's really got to be the legacy.
I think I'd just like to make a comment here, looking back and then looking today. Over the last 30, 40 years, when I look at what festivals were then and what festivals are now, and the laughter, the dance, the complete freedom of enjoyment that never was actually a part of our lives when I was growing up, simply because of different situations outside. And then because I was a part of the media, I still am in a manner of speaking, and for the first time, Pakistan Television is doing a whole day, small segments of transmission of regarding women on March the 8th, which is a huge step forward. So when you look at all of this, and there was a time when even, as we all know, some of us anyway, that we were not allowed to sit with our head uncovered. We had to have our head covered whether we were sleeping, eating, drinking, stuff like that. I won't go into the background. So moving from that to now, and looking at how women, as you see, this powerhouse, as you called us, and so on and so forth, we have moved forward. It's still a long battle ahead, but I think we've definitely moved forward in putting women in places where they were not before, in putting women in policy-making decisions, and in also now in celebrating ourselves together and enjoying the fact that we are women and we are the world.
Actually, going forward, what are our goals? I feel that, I have several goals. For example, I think the most important is innovation. I feel that, having organized at least 25 festivals, apart from that, hundreds of festivals have been held in Pakistan, and people are beginning to say that they are becoming a bit repetitive, the same kind of format and structure, sometimes the same topics, same speakers are being repeated. So going forward, I am really very actively looking for innovation in the form of actually changing the format, introducing new topics, reinforcing others. For example, absolutely, I think we need to have many more topics that involve women. And also, I think we need to introduce more artists, cultural activities, comedy. Comedy is always a hit. And we have so many stand-up comedians in Pakistan. But instead of getting the same popular ones, one has to discover new people. So the idea is to get emerging talent, lots of young, new writers, artists, singers, dancers, comedians, and involve the youth more. I'm also thinking of, actively thinking of a succession plan. And I'm trying to really get, and I find there are so many young people. If I can quickly tell you a story, we had a young student who had come as a volunteer to our festival, and his job was to accompany Zahra Nigah, and just to sort of take her to different sessions, hold her bag, hold her hand, guide her, get her a cup of tea. That was his job for 2 days. And he was saying at the end of 2 days, I fell in love with Urdu. And in his Cambridge exam, he got the highest marks. He did brilliantly in Urdu, he made that his subject. And now he's into organizing, he is my right-hand man in organizing literature festivals, a young man. And I think that's, for me, that is the future.
Absolutely, Amina. And you know what's really inspiring? That's an overused word, but I think in this case it's very relevant. What's really inspiring and special about all of you is that you are constantly setting yourself new goals, new ceilings to break, things to do, and that activation is so important. With that in mind, shall we take questions from the audience? I think we have time for one and possibly two questions if we're very quick. And I'd appreciate if they're questions, please, not comments. There's one in the front row.
Hi. So I would like to say that I agree with Jude on the part where she said someone should be curious and not let that curiosity die. I just want to ask, like, how do we inculcate that with everyone around us? Like, how should people become more curious? And how can, for example, if I think I am curious, how can I help others be more curious? Where do we, connect those dots?
It's a vast question. So I would answer it in three ways. First of all, any opportunity that you get to put your voice behind education for very young kids is important, because we often start our thinking about curiosity, with young people, but actually, in a way, the time to really cultivate curiosity is at 2 and 3 and 4. So I don't know what your policies are in Pakistan about early years education, but it's really, really critical. And in 100 years' time, we'll look back and realize that we constantly miss the trick of not helping toddlers build curiosity. And then the second thing is, I think you can make yourself somebody that people are curious about by having the courage to say, I haven't a fully formed idea, I'm not completely certain, I don't absolutely know, but here's some thoughts, so that you can help people open up their curiosity by not being certain. Do you know what I mean? I think certainty closes people down. Whereas the thing about all of us, I think, doing festivals is that we're looking at people kind of trying to bud and open up something that is half-formed. Well, we're all half-formed, aren't we? And so I think that vulnerability in conversation, to be curious and ask questions, and also say we don't fully know, but we'd love to. It's a style, I think, of engagement, one-on-one, but I think that's also a style that the festivals have, which is, fun. And the third thing I would say is get rid of status. Status kills curiosity. When you feel like you have to be important, then you're frightened to take risks. And, we're not more important than each other.